You know how many table footballs I've got in my office? F***ing 0. Welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. This one, Microsoft's 17-year WebTV revolution that never happened. I've never heard of WebTV. This was never a thing that was on my agenda, but I've read about this so many bloody times in the comments that I actually had to make a suggestion from you guys. If this is boring, it's your fault. Let's dive in. Thank you, Danny, for putting the script together. As always, Danny has a way to make even the most boring things interesting. If you hear the words Web TV today, you're probably quite likely to think of the exclusive digital-only TV shows that are now being produced to massive acclaim by the likes of Netflix and Amazon. Indeed, this is what I think Web TV must be. Like a way to watch TV online, like back in the day? To be honest, that was my first thought when Simon asked me to write a script on Web TV. I'm now kind of wishing that I hadn't written that 6,000-word script on the secret subliminal messages hiding within such small-screen masterpieces as House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, and the often overlooked Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. Don't know that one? I know Danny's kidding, but we could start a very serious television critique channel. I'd sit at a desk. I'd maybe wear a sweater of some variety. The subliminal messaging in House of Cards, Kevin Spacey, bit of a pre. It turns out that in 1995, the concept of Web TV meant something very different. Okay, I feel this is one of the ones where I should have done just, a little bit of reading before you got started. This was the year that saw the birth of a revolutionary new service, which meant to change the way that everyday people use the internet. Yet despite a much-hyped launch, a $503 million buyout from Microsoft, and a saga that spans 17 years, it's sad to think that the most memorable legacy from this long-running failure is the fact that the US government once classified it as a weapon? Alright, obviously it's gotta be some technology thing to do with TV and the internet and stuff like that. How on earth is this a weapon? Fun fact, that whole thing about having to register your hands as, I can't remember, was this on a podcast or something? About registering your hands as weapons? Totally not a thing, unless you live in Guam, where it absolutely is. The American entrepreneur and inventor Steve Pearlman was the brains behind the Web TV service, later rebranded as MSN TV for most of its lifespan. The cunning idea was to bring the functionality of the internet into the living room of everyday people who didn't necessarily have an interest in owning a proper computer. Oh, okay, so it's like a set-top box or something that you can browse the internet on your TV. Back in the day. I know this may sound like a ridiculous notion in today's world where just about every device in your household is connected to the internet and streaming YouTube videos, probably even your toaster, electric toothbrush charger, and Mr. Frosty ice crunch maker. Dude, blast from the past. Back in the 1990s, the only way to hook up to the internet was to sit at your desk in front of your chunky PC and your even chunkier monitor. Yeah, dude, those, what are they called? CRT monitors are absolute beasts. I remember at school, I took computing at A-level, and we'd all be sitting in the room, and there are these absolute beast CRT monitors on the desks. You'd turn around, and because there was one behind you, and your friend would be working on it, and classic prank would just be to yank out the power on their monitor or on their base unit, on their main unit, if you really wanted to make them lose their work. Someone once did this so many times that the monitor, just after a while, a huge cloud of smoke just rose up from it, and the teacher was like, "What happened there?" It's like, no idea. Not everyone had this kind of setup back then. Computers were still dismissed as expensive and baffling technology by large chunks of the population who probably didn't want to learn how to operate a mouse. Steve Pearlman had been browsing a website containing tempting recipes to make with Campbell's soup, because that's the kind of rock and roll lifestyle that Steve was living at the time, when it suddenly occurred to him that the target audience for such a webpage would probably never dream of owning a computer. It's weird, I just can't imagine the same dude who's looking up Campbell's soup recipes online as the guy who goes on to sell a $500 million company. It's impressive. So the idea was to bring the internet into your living room and beam it onto your television set without the need for a big computer, a monitor, a desk, or more importantly of all, an adjustable height swivel chair. The Web TV service was geared around a set-top box, which you could just park under the telly. The box, essentially a very small and lightweight computer in its own right, could establish an internet connection, and came packaged with its own special web browser optimized for the TV set. This all kind of makes sense to me. I'm like, this is a pretty good idea for a business. While the complete kit also included a full keyboard, this was most definitely a mouse-free zone. Instead, you navigated your way through cyberspace with something that resembled a TV remote control. Now that's sounding pretty clunky. Not so keen on that. Let's be honest, this already sounds a bit clunky. Absolutely. Also, I'll add, Like, I've got a fairly modern TV at home. I think I bought it last year. And it's like, you use the remote control. And it's got like a web browser built into it, which I once used. And then I was like, well, this is a piece of shit, isn't it? Never gonna use that again. But to be fair, this idea did have some logic behind it. Personal computer setup still cost a small fortune back in the 1990s, and this was a low-cost alternative which delivered a simplified version of the internet into the living rooms of people who just didn't really get computers. It might not have been meant for people like us. Damn right, I'm super computer savvy. But it did mean that your elderly aunt and strange uncle could easily get online and send emails to that distant cousin who escaped to the other side of the world. I feel like Danny's just chosen the generic story. It's like, yeah, every family has this situation. And then they could browse as many Campbell Soup's recipes as they damn well liked from the comfort of their armchairs. The WebTV Networks company had very modest beginnings, setting up a business in half of a former BMW car dealership in California, which wasn't exactly ideal for a cutting-edge technology department, but the rent was cheap. Considering their work to be top secret, they initially disguised their operations under the name of Artemis Research. The fake business name even led to its own website, which claimed that they were studying sleep deprivation, poor diet, and no social life for extended periods of time on humans and dwarf rabbits. Guys, just focus on making the product. Why is all of this necessary? Anyone comes across that, they're going to assume like it's some secret. I mean, this is the least believable business tagline or whatever ever. I'd stumble across that and be like, it's got to be some CIA secret website. You know, you click like a secret number of buttons and it's like, welcome to the CIA mainframe. It's like how you hack in a 90s movie. This was a slightly tongue-in-cheek reference to a pet rabbit called Bowser who belonged to one of the engineers, Phil Goldman. Oh my, hang on. Bowser could often be found happily hopping around the corridors of the WebTV office late at night when the engineers were hard at work. Sometimes I just feel with these like modern tech companies and stuff, like Silicon Valley companies, are like, yeah, we've got a slide that goes from the first floor to the second floor. We've got 7 football tables in the break room. And just, how about you do some work? You know how many table footballs I've got in my office? 0. Maybe if I had football tables and a slide, I'd be more successful. It's ridiculous. Bizarrely, this new fake company actually received inquiries from genuine research groups who were keen to hook up and share data on these outlandish studies. So at least WebTV had a backup plan if the WebTV thing didn't work out. I just bet those were spies, like desperate to come in from the cold, like, CIA, I'm writing to you, I need to come in, please. Incidentally, Bowser the Rabbit moved on to bigger and better things when Phil Goldman left WebTV and picked up a job at the software and electronics company General Magic. Great name. He naturally took Bowser with him, and the rabbit ended up becoming the unofficial company mascot and the inspiration for their logo. Cringe. It's pretty cringe. I'll be honest, I think Bowser the Rabbit comes out of this whole story with more credibility than anyone else. Steve Pearlman's finances ended up getting tangled into a knotty mess on the road to launching WebTV, and in fact it came perilously close to not happening at all. Pearlman was in talks with Sony and felt very confident of securing an exclusive distribution deal with the corporate giant. At the time, he was also working on closing crucial venture capital financing from Brentwood Associates, although the latter hinged entirely on the former. The negotiations were taking longer than hoped, and in the meantime, Pearlman was forced into remortgaging his house, liquidating all his assets, and maxing out his credit card to keep his operation afloat. I like that though. That's like faith in your product, go all in. You know, go big or go home. Good on you, Steve. When Sony delivered the devastating news that they wouldn't be proceeding with the distribution deal after all, this not only put the venture capital financing from Brentwood in jeopardy, but it also looked for a while as if Steve Pearlman was destined to lose everything. Yeah, that's the risk you run though, isn't it? But I think it's going to work out, because didn't Danny say that it was bought for like $500 million? Spoiler alert. In a surprise move, Brentwood decided to proceed with the financing anyway, and WebTV managed to avoid a catastrophic by the skin of a dwarf's rabbit's teeth. Ironically, it was only after WebTV secured a new distribution deal with Philips that Sony suddenly felt left out in the cold and decided to sheepishly come in back to the WebTV party, but on a weaker, non-exclusive basis. If I was Steve, I'd be like, before Philips are even on board, Philips are on board, they're keen, and Sony'd be like, alright, Philips pulled out. Sorry. WebTV was finally launched to much hype and whistles and bells in 1996, although the launch wasn't without embarrassments. One particularly cringeworthy moment, I like those, involved co-founder Bruce Leak on stage's demonstration of this wonderful system of tomorrow at a roadshow event. Bruce, I just can't call him Leak. I went to a school with a kid called Leek. He was attempting to show just how easy and quick it was to load up a website dedicated to the then contemporary hit show Friends on WebTV. We need to bear in mind that the WebTV service would naturally work a little slower than a standard internet service, as the set-top box needed to reformat and compress every web page before beaming it onto your TV screen so that the content was readable. This was in like 1996. I feel like the web loaded super slow anyway. I'm gonna see if there's a video of this. Oh, it exists, but it's an hour long. Let me see if I can find something.
They want to look at the Friends site right now.
Okay, I found it.
I think NBC has a very popular site, it looks like. And let me describe a few things about the user interface of a browser.
Yeah, he's just sitting there watching a blank TV. Oh, it's so slow. Oh god, that's amazing. It's so slow.
3 weeks later.
But it's also worth remembering that websites in the 1990s were very simple, basic, and broadly rubbish, so the process shouldn't have taken too long. However, Mr. Leek endured a painful few minutes on stage as he waffled on trying to fill up dead time, while the system struggled to get to grips with a website containing nothing more than a single photograph of the cast of Friends. A further unexpected complication occurred when the US government decided to classify the WebTV service as a weapon. The service used strong browser encryption, which was pretty advanced at the time, but we would be considered quite pathetic by today's standards. Back then, anything using strong encryption was automatically classified as munitions. Like bullets and stuff by the US government, which meant that exporting the product outside of America was banned. This would naturally have proved a little problematic for WebTV's plans for global growth. Thankfully, the problem was relatively quickly resolved, and in fact the case of WebTV proved to play a vital part in the US government sensibly relaxing the laws around cryptography to ensure that simple web browsers weren't automatically deemed to be in the same category as artillery guns, missiles, and bombs, which does make a lot of sense. Initially, sales of the service were overwhelmingly disappointing. The first year in business attracted just 56,000 subscribers. More subscribers than Business Plays, as in the making of this video though. But then again, I'm not a huge business. Which was well below the projected target. But despite all these setbacks and embarrassments, WebTV made enough noise for Microsoft to sit up and take notice. In fact, Bill Gates himself was excited about the future potential of the service and became personally involved in the discussions, which eventually led to Microsoft acquiring the operation for a cool $503 million. It's got 56,000 subscribers, Bill! Christ. That is $1,000 per subscriber. I'm not saying, Business Plays as well. You've got 30,000 subscribers at the moment. Bill, if you're interested, you can have it. I'll do super reasonable, 10 times less, 30 mil. Easy. A few years later, WebTV was rebranded as MSN TV, and it's fair to say that by the year 2005, subscriptions had picked up considerably, with over 1 million subscribers generating around $150 million a year. So this was certainly no epic financial failure. That's cool. Good for you. And I like this story. The Steve guy who started this, he's like maxing out his credit cards and he thinks he's not going to make it. It works out and he makes $500 million. It's just that the service never quite took off in the way that many predicted, and the WebTV revolution just never happened. One of the main reasons why WebTV failed to ensnare more subscribers has already been illustrated by Bruce Leak's lame attempts to showcase the Friends website to a roadshow audience. It just never really worked very well. Kind of important. Although Microsoft worked hard on optimizing pages for the TV screen, navigating your way through the internet with a remote control while sitting several feet away from the screen was always going to feel like an awkward experience at best. The idea of reading and sending emails in your living room was originally one of the key selling points of WebTV, but the world wasn't too far away from being able to send emails from a smartphone in the palm of your hand, and this kind of made the set-top TV box under the TV feel more than a little redundant. And of course, the entire tech industry got behind the idea of using the internet on the pocket screen, developing dedicated apps and mobile-friendly websites to push forward the smartphone revolution. Yeah, it makes me wonder, why does my TV even have a web browser? Is this just like something they have to do? It just comes with like the software that goes on there? Who uses that? And it's insanely clunky. In contrast, Microsoft was the lone company working on WebTV, and it was impossible for them to capture the interest of third-party developers because they never pulled in enough subscribers to make it seem like a credible move for the rest of the industry. Now that $500 million is seeming like money less well spent. It's perhaps surprising that WebTV or MSN TV lasted for quite as long as it did. As the number of subscriptions naturally dwindled over the years, the plug was finally pulled in 2013, marking the final chapter of a 17-year TV revolution in which most viewers had flicked over to see what was on the other channel. The service was often described as ahead of its time, but I think it's more accurate to say that WebTV was just quickly overtaken by the rise of the much smaller screen. This was interesting. I appreciate this recommendation. It turns out to be quite an interesting story. Good for Steve, less good for Bill. Kind of inevitable what was going to happen to it, but I liked it. If you've got other suggestions, leave them below. Also, use the thumbs up and vote the ones you like up to the top. This has been Business Blaze. Gently touch that like button, subscribe, notification bell, all of that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.
あんたまだテレビ？
うちテレビ見てんのとちゃいます。インターネット来てるんです。リモコン一つであら楽しい。おうちのテレビで WebTV